Chapter 69 of History of the Norwegian People, Volume 2, by Knut Gjerset. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Norwegian Emigration to America, the Norwegians in the United States. The demand that the world should be populated and developed has come to the nations of Europe like the duty and destiny of parenthood. So much vital force has been contributed to the development of the new nations in both hemispheres that the peoples of the Old World have felt it as a distinct loss, sometimes even as a calamity. Youth and vigor have been given to the growing states in North and South America, in Australia and Africa, till the cheeks of the older social organisms have turned pale. But he who looks beyond the pangs of the hour and measures development by the progress of humanity will recognize that even for those who have given most, a new era of development has come. Paths have been blazed to a fuller degree of self-realization, and the strength sacrificed returns to the rising generations with new life and fuller joys. In Norway, emigration has been so heavy for almost a century that it has been viewed with grave apprehension as a serious menace to the growth and well-being of the nation. To a small country numbering less than 2.5 million inhabitants, the yearly loss of so many thousands of the best citizens must be a source of deep regret. Ability and energy are continually lost by the constant drain. Friends are parted, old firesides deserted, and a feeling of sadness is created which obscures the vision and makes the people view the phenomenon of emigration even with needless alarm. Many circumstances have contributed to increase emigration from Norway during the past century. The encouragement given by friends and relatives already in this country, the advertising done by railways and steamship companies, the easy communications between Europe and America, and love of travel and adventure have undoubtedly stimulated the longing of the young people to see the new world beyond the seas. But economic conditions have been at all times the chief cause. Since the industries were little developed, the chief pursuits were lumbering, fishing, farming, and dairying. But the tillable area is limited, and before scientific methods came to the aid both of fishermen and husbandmen, labor even in these pursuits yielded small returns. The problem of finding profitable employment, of securing a degree of economic independence and well-being was for many attended with serious difficulty, and the population usually kept in advance of economic progress. Modern science and industrial progress are rapidly changing the whole economic character of the country, and Norway will undoubtedly be able to support many times the present number of inhabitants. But emigration, until quite recently, must be regarded as an overflow of population, an attempt of the surplus to find opportunity to build new homes under more favorable conditions. Since this is its real character, it follows that it is self-regulating and that it will vary with changing economic conditions both at home and abroad. In the April number of Norrmansforbundet for 1913, Mr. Gothenborg shows how the emigration to America until quite recently constantly increased, and how its rise and fall have depended on economic conditions at home. While the number of emigrants in the period 1836 to 1842 only reached a few hundred, he writes, it rose in 1843 to 1,600 and has since not fallen below 1,000 a year. In 1847, the potato crop in Norway was poor, times were hard, grain prices high, and economic conditions generally unfavorable. For this reason, emigration rose to 4,000 or 5,000, and this number remained quite constant, with few exceptions from 1851 to 1865, though the economic conditions improved. In 1866, emigration increased suddenly to 15,455 from 4,000 the year previous, owing chiefly to the closing of the Civil War, which had hindered emigration. In the following years, the number was gradually reduced from 10,357 in 1873 to about 4,000 in 1874 to 1878 because of improved economic conditions, extensive railway construction, and other large enterprises. But in the 80s, another period of hard times came. Railway construction ceased, and the emigration reached a volume greater than ever before. In 1882, the number rose to 28,804, and during that whole decade, it exceeded 20,000 per year, except in 1884 to 1886 and 1889, when the number was 13,000 to 15,000 a year. The same conditions existed in the beginning of the 90s. In 1893, about 19,000 emigrated, but in 1894 the number was reduced to 5,642 because of good times. In 1899, when the times again became hard, the number rose again. In 1900, it reached 11,000. In 1901, 13,000. It soon increased to 20,000, and in 1903, it reached about 27,000. It remained above 20,000 till 1907, but it dropped in 1908 to 8,500 because of hard times in America. In 1909, it rose again to 16,000, and in 1910 to almost 19,000, but dropped again in 1911 to about 12,000, and in 1912 to 91,005. Mr. Gottenborg finds that in the period 1850 to 1911, 707,986 persons emigrated from Norway. As soon as economic conditions can be established which will enable all the people to live at home in reasonable comfort, few will be tempted to go as emigrants to foreign lands, and emigration will soon cease. Dr. Isaac A. Hauerwich has shown that the new economic development in Germany, Sweden, and Denmark has greatly reduced emigration from these countries. In Germany and Denmark, emigration has ceased altogether, and immigration has begun instead. The progress of agriculture, says this author, has turned Denmark into a country of immigration. Considerable numbers of Polish peasants come during every agricultural season to work on the farms in Denmark. In 1907, their number was 6,251. The same will undoubtedly happen in Norway if the present industrial and economic development continues uninterrupted. The recent industrial progress of Norway can be gauged, says Hauerwich, by the fact that from 1897 to 1908, the quantity of horsepower used increased 146.5%. The average number of wage earners, reduced to the basis of 300 working days per year, increased during the same period 45%, while the population increased during the same period only 9%. The various industries now support over one-third of the population. The growing demand for labor, the increase of wages, the greater security given the wage earners through accident and sickness insurance and non-employment funds, and the rapid improvement of economic conditions in general have already caused a noticeable decrease in emigration. Before many years have passed, it may have ceased to work annoyance and to sap the strength of the nation. The emigration from Norway to America may be said to have begun in 1821, when Cleng Pearson of Tyver parish north of Stavanger and Knut Olsen from the island of Fogen were sent by some Quaker friends of the district to investigate conditions in the New World. After 3 years they returned, and their reports were so favorable that several families, led by Lars Larsen Gillane, resolved to emigrate. A small sloop, Restaurationen, was purchased. Captain Lars Olsen and mate Eriksson were hired, and the little vessel carrying 52 persons set sail from Stavanger July 4, 1825. After a perilous and adventurous voyage, they reached New York October 9th of that year, 53 in number, as Mrs. Lars Larsen Gillane has given birth to a daughter. In November they reached their final destination, Kendall, then called Murray, or in Orleans County, New York, where the first Norwegian settlement was founded. Here they bought land from Joseph Fellows at the price of $5 per acre and agreed to pay for it in 10 yearly installments. The summer was already spent, but they succeeded in building a log cabin and by threshing with the flail the grain of their neighbors, a work for which they received every 11th bushel of wheat. They secured the necessary supply of food for the winter. In the spring they cleared and seeded a couple of acres, and the next fall they could harvest their first crop. The difficulties and discouragements encountered were many, but the colonists soon learned to love their humble homes in the new country. It appears, however, that they failed to secure proper title to their land. Joseph Fellows, who was a Quaker, seems to have been very generous and kind, but they were probably unable to pay the purchasing price, and most of them sought new homes in the western states, especially in LaSalle County, Illinois, where the second Norwegian settlement was founded at Fox River in 1834. Not a few persons emigrated from Norway during the decade 1825 to 1835, but they came as individual immigrants, and no new Norwegian settlement was founded. In 1835, Knut Slagvig, who had come to America in the sloop Restaurationen, returned to Norway, and many people from the districts between Bergen and Stavanger flocked to hear his accounts of the New World. The desire to visit America spread rapidly, and in 1836 two brigs, Norden and Den Norske Klippe, sailed from Stavanger with about 200 immigrants led by Knut Slagvig. On arriving in America, most of them were persuaded by the intrepid Clem Pearson to go to Fox River, LaSalle County, Illinois, where he had already founded a new settlement in the great western wilderness. Fox River soon became a thriving community, but the attempt to found a third settlement was less successful. In 1837, two ships, Eiger from Bergen and Enigden from Stavanger, sailed to America with about 170 emigrants. They intended to go to the Fox River settlement, but on arriving in Chicago, they were told that LaSalle County was very unhealthy, and a number, led by Ole Rinning, were persuaded to go to Beaver Creek in Iroquois County. In this marshy wilderness they built their homes, but the fall rains soon turned it into a swamp, and in the spring the whole region was inundated. The privations and utter hopelessness of the situation might well fill the most courageous hearts with despair. Many fell victims to malaria and dysentery, among others Rinning himself. The colony was abandoned, and those who were able made their way to the settlement at Fox River. In 1839, about 40 emigrants formed a new settlement at Muskego, Wisconsin, the first Norwegian settlement in that state. Already in 1845, plans were laid for the publication of a Norwegian newspaper, and 2 years later, Nordileset, published by Even Hegg and James D. Reimert, began to appear in the town of Norway, Racine County, in this settlement. In 1844, the first Norwegian Lutheran church was built by Reverend C. L. Clausen. In 1839, the first Norwegian settlers also appeared at Rock Prairie and Jefferson Prairie, and in 1840, the great Norwegian settlement at Koshkonong, Dane County, Wisconsin, was founded. These early settlers had shown the way where thousands were soon to follow. In 1843, the number of Norwegian immigrants rose, as already stated, to 1,600, and during the next decades they came in ever-increasing numbers to take possession of the fertile, unsettled plains of the Great West. According to the 13th census of the United States, the Norwegians in this country numbered in 1910 979,099. Of these, 403,877 were born in Norway. The other 575,222 were born of immigrated Norwegian parents. But if the Norwegian element in its entirety should be counted, we would still have to add the whole second generation born in this country, which is even more numerous than the first, and it would not be unfair to count also a considerable part of the third generation. According to the most conservative estimate, then the number of Norwegians in the United States in 1914 is not less than 1,600,000. The greater number have settled in the northwestern states and in Washington, Oregon, California, New York, Massachusetts, and New Jersey, where according to the census they are spread throughout the states, the most heavily in Minnesota and the lightest in New Jersey. The 13th census of the United States shows that 68.7% of the Norwegians live in the states of Minnesota, Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, Missouri, Nebraska, and Kansas, and they show a greater tendency toward concentration than any other nationality, says the census. Very few live in Missouri. If we substitute Wisconsin instead, the percentage will be even much higher. According to report of W. J. Harris, director of the United States Bureau of the Census, the foreign element constitutes about one-third of the entire population of the United States, or 32,243,382, counted according to the mother tongue. But this number is too low for reasons already stated. Of this large foreign element, 87.5% speak one of the 8 leading foreign languages, and Norwegian is in the list. The Norwegian tongue, then, is one of the 8 languages which is spoken most in the United States, but as an ethnic element in the American people, the Norwegians are of far greater relative importance than even these figures would indicate. In Norway, popular education has reached the highest stage of efficiency, and illiteracy is wholly confined to the mentally imbecile. The reports of the United States Commissioner of Immigration also show that the Scandinavians are the best educated immigrants which land on our shores, as they are accustomed at home to popular government and democratic social conditions. They are better qualified than almost any other immigrants to enter into the full spirit of American institutions. In the development of the states of the Northwest, they have been a most potent factor, both economically and intellectually. Statistics show that as tillers of the soil, they rank higher than other nationalities, and that they choose farming as their vocation to a far greater degree than any other people. In 1900, 49.8% of all Norwegians in America were farmers, 42.3% of all Danes, and 30.2% of all Swedes. If we add also the laborers in the rural districts who are usually farmhands, the percentage will be of Norwegians 59.3%, of the Danes 52.3%, and of the Swedes 43%. The 13th census of the United States for 1910 shows that of the foreign-born white population, a much larger percentage own their farms than of the native white population, the ratio being 81.4% to 66.3%. But the available statistics indicate that of the Scandinavians, a larger percentage own their farms than of most other nationalities. They own more than their share of the soil and have reached a higher degree of prosperity than almost any other nationality in the rural districts. According to the census of 1910, 10,886 of the farmers of the state of North Dakota were born in Norway. Of these, 9,562 own their farms, while 1,341 are renters. If the farms were not so large, the number of renters would be still smaller, but in the state the average acreage of farms is 382.3 acres, with an average value of $13,109. In Minnesota, the average acreage is 177 acres, and the average value not less than $12,000. The counties where the Norwegian population is largely located will be found in southern, western, and northwestern Minnesota, the richest agricultural counties of the state. There is perhaps no more prosperous agricultural region in the United States, writes Auditor of State Samuel G. Iverson. Those who have given the matter some thought, he continues, agree with me that about one-third of the farms of Minnesota are owned by those who were born in Norway, or their descendants, and that these number now in the aggregate from 450,000 to 500,000. One-third of the 165,000 farms of the state would be 55,000, which at an average of $12,000 would be $66 million. The intelligence and diligence which have enabled the Norwegians to become so successful in economic pursuits have characterized their efforts also in other fields. Especially noticeable are these traits in political life, where they have shown an ability which has made them an influential factor, especially in the Northwest. At first they had many difficulties to contend with as a foreign element, but as they are trained from home to exercise the duties of popular government, they were soon able to take an active part in all civic duties. Many have become true leaders in their communities, and the number of those who have been elected to the highest offices is relatively very large. 5 have been governors, 4 lieutenant governors, 12 congressmen, 3 United States senators, besides one of the senators from Utah, whose mother is Norwegian. 8 have been secretaries of state, 7 state treasurers, 4 state auditors, 1 state attorney general, 1 state superintendent of public instruction, and 2 judges of state supreme courts. Many have also been employed in the federal service. 10 have been revenue collectors, 10 consuls, and 3 United States ministers to foreign countries. Thousands of others have held positions of trust and honor in community and state. The fact that the Norwegians in America, even in the first generation, have been able to achieve such success is not an accident, but is due to the intellectual culture which they have received as a heritage from their fatherland. Closer investigation reveals the fact that their life in this country is more closely connected with their history and development at home than a casual observer might be led to think. The freedom of the Norwegian people is the result of a long development, and their struggle for liberty has been of the same conservative kind as that of the English nation. They did not win their freedom suddenly through a revolutionary uprising, but the struggle which lasted through centuries was waged for the sake of preserving the freedom which was theirs from time immemorial. Throughout the period of union with Denmark, the conflicts were small and scattered, but so bitter that they fostered an intense spirit of liberty and served to develop a marked willingness in the popular character. In 1814, the national independence was quickly won, but during the union with Sweden, Norway, as the weaker state, had to exert the utmost vigilance to maintain the principles of sovereignty and equality granted in the Constitution and the Act of Union. All premises and provision had to be diligently scrutinized, and keen-eyed statesmanship had to preserve what the spirit of liberty had won. In these long struggles, the Norwegian people have not only had an experience in popular self-government, which has proved most valuable in their new environment in America, but they have developed in the trials of these struggles a self-assertive social temperament, an austere spirit of liberty, a rigid adherence to established principles, and a conservatism of thought, which is clearly noticeable in their political life in the New World. They have for the most part joined the Republican Party, which represented the principles of freedom and the rights of man in the Great Civil War. They found in this party to a large extent their own ideals. They learned to love it. They felt proud of its lofty principles and great achievements, and they have clung to it with fidelity which finds its explanation in their own long struggle for liberty. In politics, the Norwegian could never be an opportunist. He takes the matter seriously and demands clear issues and rigid principles which he can fully sanction. For this reason, he has never been very successful in American city politics, where the bosses have held sway, where everything has been allowed, and where principles have often been regarded as political stupidity. In their loyal adherence to their chosen party, the Norwegian people have been ably assisted by the Norwegian American press, which, with but a few exceptions, has always supported the Republicans, an attitude which it has not changed even when general defection has threatened. The Norwegian American papers have always regarded new parties and untried political principles with skepticism, and have maintained that reforms and true progress could best be secured through the tried old party. The love of liberty and the conservative loyalty to principles which characterize the Norwegians are nowhere more clearly seen than in their church organizations, in which they have realized to the fullest extent their own ideas. The 5 Norwegian Lutheran church bodies in America now number over 500,000 members, and they are still growing rapidly. Their own official statistics show that there has been much controversy between these different groups regarding questions of doctrine and church practice, but with regard to the great issue of preserving the Lutheran faith as they have inherited it from their fathers, they have all been animated by the same spirit. On this point, they have shown a conservatism which has its root in the national character and which has given the Norwegian Lutheran Church in America its dignity and strength. This trait is more remarkable because it is associated with the most pronounced spirit of freedom in all matters touching the general management of church affairs. Instead of preserving the state church features to which they had been accustomed at home, they have established in this country a free church based on the most democratic principles of popular government. The congregation is at the same time the organic unit and the highest authority, and manages its own affairs without outside official supervision. The affairs of the whole church are decided at yearly conventions of delegates sent by the congregations. All officials are elected for short terms, and their powers are so limited that they act as counselors and advisors rather than as supervisors. True to their belief that knowledge is power, the Norwegians have always been earnest supporters of the state universities and public schools. But they have also built a number of private colleges and high schools where the courses are supplemented by such branches as will tend to create among the young people an interest in the history and culture of their own people, as it is believed that the inspiring traditions and tender memories of the fatherland can yet teach valuable lessons if properly preserved and respected. Besides the regular high school and college curriculum, considerable attention is devoted in these schools to Norwegian history and literature, religion and music, the subjects which represent in a special way the heritage which the Norwegian people have received from their fathers. 30 such schools with 300 instructors and 4,400 students are now in operation. The centennial of Norway's independence was celebrated in 1914 with a centennial exposition and great festivities in Christiania, and a great number of Norwegian Americans returned to the old fatherland for the occasion. On the 17th of May, a procession of 30,000 children with Norwegian flags and a large number of Norwegian Americans with American flags marched through the streets of the capital. At Eidsvoll, The Storthing assembled in regular session in the old hall where the Constitution was framed in 1814, and on May 20th a festive religious service was celebrated in the Cathedral of Trondheim. In June, a musical festival was held in Christiania by thousands of singers assembled from all parts. A choir of 250 trained Norwegian singers from America, led by Julius Jaeger, Ærik Bjørnsson, and the composer Alfred Paulsen of Chicago, assisted, as did also the Luther College Concert Band, which, in answer to a special invitation, made an extensive concert tour in Norway under the leadership of President C.K. Prius of Luther College and the musical director Carlo A. Sperati. The celebration closed with a festival on the 4th of July, when the visiting Norwegian Americans brought their formal greetings to their fatherland. For over a year, a large committee headed by State Senator L.O. Thorpe of Wilmar, Minnesota, had been engaged in collecting a memorial fund, which on that day was presented to the Storthing by Professor H.D. Stubb, D.D. of St. Paul, Minnesota, president of the Norwegian Synod. The Memorial Fund Committee was represented by Dr. T. Stabo of Decorah, Iowa, the United Church by its president, Reverend T.H. Dahl, D.D., and the state of North Dakota by its chief executive governor, L.B. Hanna, who presented to the Norwegian government a statue of Abraham Lincoln. This piece of art, the work of the Norwegian-American sculptor Paul Fjelde, was a present from that American Commonwealth, which is indebted to the sons and daughters of Norway for so much of its progress and prosperity. It was a token of the spirit which has knit strong the fraternal ties between the Viking race of the North and the land of freedom in the New World. End of chapter 69. End of History of the Norwegian People, Volume 2, by Knut Gjerset.